بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونشكره على ما هدانا ونصلي ونسلم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحبه المنتجبين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه. Praise be to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Lord of here and the hereafter. We praise Him for all the guidance and the blessing that we receive from Him, conscious and mindful that without such guidance and blessing we would certainly go astray. We praise and we salute our Holy Prophet of Islam and his pure progenies. Sisters and brothers, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another Tafsir session. The surah that we have tonight under consideration is Surah al-Ghashiyah. And we recite, as usual, the surah, the translation, and then as much as possible within the given time, we try to explain and talk about the major points that the chapter contains. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هل أتاك حديث الغاشية وجوه يومئذ خاشعة عاملة ناصبة تصلى نارا حامية تسقى من عين آنية ليس لهم طعام إلا من ضريع لا يسمن ولا يغني من جوع وجوه يومئذ ناعمة لسعيها راضية في جنة عالية لا تسمع فيها لاغية فيها عين جارية فيها سرر مرفوعة وأكواب موضوعة ونمارق مصفوفة وزرابي مبثوثة أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت وإلى السماء كيف رفعت وإلى الجبال كيف نصبت وإلى الأرض كيف سطحت فذكر إنما أنت مذكر لست عليهم بمسيطر إلا من تولى وكفر فيعذبه الله العذاب الأكبر إن إلينا إيابهم ثم إن علينا حسابهم. In the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful. Has the news of all enshrouding calamity reached you? Many faces on that day will be downcast and worn out. They will enter the blazing fire. They will be made to drink from a sizzling spring. Their only food will be thorny bushes, which will neither fatten nor satisfy anyone's hunger. Other faces on that day will be fresh, pleased with their endeavor in a lofty garden, where they will hear no vain conversation. In it there will be thrones set high, and goblets well arranged, carpets well set out, and cushions spread all over. Don't they see the camel, how they have been made? And do they not behold the sky and how it has been raised? Don't they look at the mountains, how they have been set aloft? And don't they see the earth, how it has been spread out? Just remind them, for your duty is to remind. You are not to force them, as for he who turns away and denies God will punish them gravely. Indeed, to us will they return, then it is up to us to call them to account. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Again, the usual discussion and the debate. Certainly, the format of Surah al-Ghashiyah fits exactly with the profile that we talked about Makki surahs. Very short, relatively speaking, short verses, and focus on various topics relating to the fundamental principles of faith: Tawheed, Nubuwwah, Ma'ad. This chapter focuses on the hereafter, the day of judgment, and how people, the day of resurrection, and what happens to people on that day. Like the previous chapter that inshallah in 2 weeks from now we will discuss it, focuses on the dichotomy that exists and the contrast. These chapters compare and contrast between those who submit. They have a plan for the hereafter. They struggle to achieve their goal, and those who purely settle for the worldly material and the world glamour. And naturally, the consequences that they're going to have on the day of resurrection. The surah begins with a vivid description of the torment, suffering of those who do not obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in fire. This covers verses 1 to 7, followed by description of blessing enjoyed in the garden by those who submit to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is from verses 8 to 16. It then calls people to witness the signs of God in creation, particularly because Quran is directed to the Jahiliyyah people at that particular time. Their lifestyle is given to them and reminded as an example. For any desert dweller, camel, sky, earth, this is something that they have to grapple with all the time. And these are presented to them as a sign of glory and the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The signs of Allah in creation, which is verses 17 to 20. And then the chapter concludes by reminding the Holy Prophet that the primary goal of his prophecy is to remind people. It is not for him to force anyone to accept faith. We have talked about this before in previous chapters that we have discussed. From an Islamic point of view, the dynamic of free will and the organic growth from the heart. So there must be a free will. We talked about this a little bit today. Free will, the desire to work and allow that heart to gradually move and shift towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are only a warner, and ultimately they have to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who will account them and ask them to account for their deed, and naturally those who succeed and those who fail. هل أتاك حديث الغاشية, the first verse of this surah. It's a unique grammatical questioning in Arabic language that asks people not to solicit an answer, but to force reflection. When the matter is something grave that deserves reflection and contemplation, it's presented in a unique formulation of a question. The question is not doesn't require a closed answer, yes, I have received the message, or no, I haven't. It forces the listener, the reader, to think and reflect. What is it that's coming next? What is this hadith al-Ghashiyah? What is it that is going to engulf and enshroud, to cover? Ghasha and Ghashyan is literally in Arabic means to cover. Sometimes is used in reference to nights, when night covers the whole light of the day or the whole life. Commentators have argued about exactly what is it that Surah, this verse is trying to point out to. A group of commentators they have said that it is in reference to time, the unique time on the Day of Judgment. Any time on earth, there is before and there is after. And anyone that happened to be within the constraint of this time, they were not present before and they won't be present after. There is a deadline. Apart from the day of the judgment, on the day of resurrection, there is no before and after its presence. And because the time is present, it engulfs and enshrouds everyone. قل إن الأولين سورة قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم. All the creation are going to be present in that day. So there is no before and after. It's a unique concept of time which is different, all enshrouding, all covers, all enclosing everyone. Others say that here, when you look at the context, particularly this concept of Ghasha or Ghashiyah, immediately followed by those group of people that are going to fail on the Day of Judgment, the sinners, is to do with the sin. Because the sin, all our deeds, particularly the sins, on the Day of Judgment is going to be resurrected in a unique manner that covers and engulfs and somehow encircles our life or our being. Surah Al-Baqarah, بَلَى مَنْ كَسَبَ سَيِّئَةً وَأَحَاطَتْ بِهِ خَطِيئَتُهُ. On the Day of Judgment, those who committed a sin or they were sinful, and their sins and khati'ah, their shortcomings, is engulfing them. So there is these group of commentators referring to a number of verses in the Holy Quran. They say that Jahannam, for example, we have in the verse, وَإِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ لَمُحِيطَةٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. The fire is engulfing. It's a unique quality or unique characteristic that it engulfs the sinner. We don't have Jannah to be engulfing, but certainly we have as far as Jahannam being engulfing. The familiar, if we were to search for a central theme in this chapter, is this compare and contrast between two groups of people, whether we call them the sinners and those who submitted to the command of Allah, whether we call them Hizbullah and Hizbul Shaitan or Hizbul Taghut, whether we call them the winners and the losers, whether we call them those who planned for the hereafter and those who purely focused on the material glamour of this life. These are only what we call academic. We go through the Holy Quran, we see different verses, uses different narrative to point to the fact that ultimately on the Day of Judgment, based on how we structure our life and we direct our attention and the strategy chosen towards that goal. If it is purely dedicated to this life, that nothing about the hereafter, we are the losers. And then this chapter is going to graphically talk about what happens to the faces and everything else of these individuals when they are resurrected. But for those who have a clear goal, clearly established, understand that this material life is only means for the hereafter, and use it properly. Remember, in few of the chapters that we have talked in the past, Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah salamu alayhi has an apt description of the distinction between the two groups. Those who look at the material life at the material life. The goal is the material life. And those who look through the material life. They are mindful of the hereafter. The goal is not the material life. The mean by which we use it to gain the hereafter becomes the material life. If you look at the material life, the goal and the objective is this glamour. But if you look through it, you don't notice it. You only notice it because you want to use it for the hereafter. So this division and segmentation of the group on the Day of Judgment and Resurrection into two groups is the central theme here. And then after that, Quran in this chapter begins to give some vivid description of how they are going to appear on the Day of Judgment. The first group have a unique physical reality on that day. Their faces and characteristics. They are humiliated, weary, anxious, distorted. Why? Because they realized that all their efforts, they find out all the struggle for the material life and the wasted time is futile, and they have no value whatsoever on the Day of Judgment. So they become exhausted because their effort on this earth has brought them nothing. All their actions are nullified. They feel empty-handed, driven, particularly when they are driven towards fire and chastisement and punishment. They realize that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them as a mean that they could have used for the hereafter, as classic, one of the verses in the Holy Quran, رَبِّ ارْجِعُونِي لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلْ صَالِحًا. Now the veils are removed, the reality is struck one in the face. Now what happens? Oh Lord, let me go back and start all over again. Kalla. It's not going to happen. You were given the opportunity. You were reminded by the external reminders, the Prophet and everything else. Your intellect told you that this world is not everything, and yet you ignored it. The next passage now paints a different picture for those who succeed. This time, the winners are happy, their faces radiating with contentment. They are well pleased with their struggle and well placed in the lofty garden. This is the compare and contrast in the physical reality outside. And particularly for those that are granted the privilege of heaven and the lofty garden, there certainly will not be any useless talks and vain talks in heaven. And this concept, we will read it inshallah in Surah al-Waqa'ah and some others. لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما. They are not shall hear no worthless talk and conversation, and the only thing that they hear is salam, salam, peace, and so on. So this notion that ultimately is trying to create, remember we have talked about this before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses metaphors. Some concepts are very difficult for us to understand and imagine and comprehend. Allah uses these notions of metaphors to make it easier for us to at least fathom some of these concepts. So in this chapter, Allah presents two characteristics, two individuals, two groups of people. One, the sinners, the failure, and the other one are the ones that submit to the command of Allah and the winners. Each one on the day of judgment are going to be resurrected, but having a unique profile and characteristics. And some of these characteristics were outlined here. One of the fundamental concepts that is presented in this chapter is the relationship between sa'i, endeavor, and reward, and jaza. How one directs one's effort and struggle relates to what we're going to get on the hereafter. Whether this sa'i, struggle, and effort is in the positive or whether it is in the negative, they both will be rewarded. But one reward will be positive, the other one will be negative. So this notion of a relationship, this dynamic between sa'i, struggle, effort, and jaza and reward in the hereafter. The second principle that we really need to talk about it here, in this chapter, wujuh, wajh in Arabic language means face. But also it is used as an inner reality of human being. What one will be resurrected according to one's deed. Remember, I might appear now in the form of a physical human being. But my true nature, what it is dependent or contingent on the deeds that I'm committing on this earth. What we hear in these verses is that relationship, the dialectical relationship, in the same way that I can change and I have power to impact my deed. Once I commit these deeds will impact my soul and change it accordingly. If the act is good, the soul is elevated. If the act is bad, إِنْهُمْ كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ, as the Quran would say. One would sink to asfal al-safilin. Remember the story of Abu Hamza al-Thumali and Imam Zayn al-Abidin, salawatullah salam alayhi, according to tradition, says that in one of the trips to Hajj, I saw a huge number of people going around doing tawaf around Bayt al-Haram. And I somehow, boasting about the number, I turned to Imam Zayn al-Abidin and said, Ya ibn Rasulullah, ma akthar al-hajij. Look how many people have come this year for Hajj. Imam looked at me with a unique, reflective look, and he said, ma akthar al-dhajij wa aqall al-hajij. Too much noise, yes, but too few true hujjaj around. You want to see the reality? He said, Imam waved his hand in front of my eyes, and he said, now look. And I looked, only so few individuals, a human being. The rest were somehow embodiment of different animals. You name it, they were there. So if the true nature by which we are going to be resurrected on the day of judgment becomes our wajh. The soul, the resurrected soul, takes a particular kind of shape and form and profile. That profile is related to the deeds that we commit on this earth. Not only there is a direct relationship between sa'i and reward, endeavor and reward, but the deeds that we commit, the doer and the deeds, they have some kind of synergy between them, a dialectical relationship. I have the power over my deed, but once I do and commit the deed that I'm supposed to do, bad or good, it comes back to change the reality. But unfortunately on this earth, because of the veil, I am unable to see it. In one of the verses in the Holy Quran, regarding those people who take the wealth and what belongs to the orphans. And a verse says, يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. The moment that you remove this wealth that belongs to the orphans from them and you use it for yourself, it's as if you are swallowing fire. But unfortunately, the veil is covering in front of our eyes and we don't see the reality. So these two concepts are critical, because later on in other verses in the Holy Quran, the concept of sa'i comes in. I just point to few of the verses. And لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Humans shall not deserve but reward of their effort. وَأَنَّ سَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. Whatever you have struggled on this earth is going to be manifested and seen. How it's going to be manifested and seen? In the way that it affects my soul. When I stand up on the day of judgment, astaghfiru billah, if I look like a beast, then clearly that's the result of my deed, what I have done on this earth. يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا, Surah Zilzala. ليروا أعمالهم. People come out wandering aimlessly around so that they to be shown to them their deeds. فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره. Even if it is a small thing, bad or good, you are going to see it. In Surah Luqman, the conversation between Luqman and his son, Luqman tells his son, even an iota of a deed under a huge rock is going to be brought on the day of judgment and resurrected and for you to see it. But you need to have sa'i. For the sa'i to have some kind of positive reward, it has to be clearly defined and clearly established. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ وَسَعَى لَهَا سَعْيَهُ وَهُوَ مُؤْمِنٌ فَأُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ سَعْيُهُمْ مَشْكُورًا. You really need to have a clear goal established. That you need, مَنْ أَرَادَ الْآخِرَةَ. Focus. That's where we are moving. Wasa'a, then you struggle. The sa'i and the struggle is directed towards akhirah, not for the houses, the cars, and everything else on this earth. And the faith and iman. In the previous chapters that we have discussed, the so-called golden rules for these concepts to be worthy, we have talked about them. In this particular Surah Isra, ayah number 19 says that وَمَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ الْعَاجِلَ, again makes a distinction, a comparative between the two. Those who purely focus on short-term benefit for the here, not the hereafter. عَجَّلْنَا لَهُ فِيهَا مَا يَشَاءُ. If we desire, we will give it to them. But those who would like to go to the hereafter, they need to make a clear intention. Arad al-akhirah, then you direct your sa'i and your struggle, and then your faith, all of them have to come together. Then this chapter moves about what we discussed earlier regarding the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in creation. Calls people 17 to 20. Calls people to witness the signs of God in his creation. But these verses are talking to a unique group of people. Camels, mountain, sky, and earth would be most predominant aspect of a desert lifestyle. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings these concepts, these examples, these metaphors. This is something that you constantly deal with. You have to deal with the camel. You have to deal with the sky as you travel around, and stars and so on. You see the mountain and you see the earth. Use them as a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in creation. Quran here indicates that the reflection upon the signs in the created order should be sufficient to make one to understand the truth. But unfortunately, some people are blinded, no matter, even if they struck by tons of signs, استحوذ عليهم الشيطان فأنساهم ذكر الله. They are not going to wake up until, as the hadith says, you are buried and then you awakened over there, you realize that it is too late, in the lahad. فذكر, after going through أفلا ينظرون إلى الإبل كيف خلقت, etc., etc., then the Holy Prophet is reminded that إنما عليك البلاغ وعلينا الحساب. You are commanded to deliver the message. On the day of judgment, the reckoning is up to us. We are the one who would call people to account. Your responsibility is to deliver the message in the best possible way. This is something that we really need to learn here. It is not for us to force someone to accept, but certainly it is for us to remind, فَذَكِّرْ إِنَّ الذِّكْرَى تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. We need to remind people, but you certainly cannot force them to accept anything if they don't want to. Why? Because in this chapter, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَذَكِّرْ إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُذَكِّرْ لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ. At the end of the chapter, remind them, إِنَّ إِلَيْنَا إِيَابَهُمْ ثُمَّ إِنَّ عَلَيْنَا حِسَابًا. Ultimately, they have to come back to us, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who's going to ultimately reward them if the sa'i and the effort and the struggle has been properly directed, and punish them if they are not. Faith is an organic matter. You cannot force it on somebody. It has to grow into the heart, through the heart. This is why most people in our community, it's laqlaqatul lisan. Remember Imam Hussein salawatullah salamu alayhi, an-nasu abidud dunya. They are enslaved by the material glamour. وَالدِّينُ لَاعِقٌ عَلَىٰ أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ. It's just something that they pay lip service to. Why? Because when they are tested by calamities, by losses and everything else, few people remain truly faithful. And this is something that this verse is trying to remind people, that belief, there is ample evidence for us if we want to open the eyes of our hearts and mind and understand the reality, the signs of God. But if we wish and desire not to go, and as the verse that I alluded to, وَمَنْ كَانَ يُرِيدُ الْعَاجِلَ, we want only to focus on this material life short-term benefit, then naturally you can do whatever one wants. But be mindful that ultimately you return to Allah. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You return to Allah, and the reckoning is in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us during these difficult times, and to bless us with His mercies, and so that we really reflect on the life that we want to lead, and heed the warning that we receive from the faith and everything else, that there is life on earth is a temporary arrangement, that at the end of the day we have to leave and depart. May Allah bless you all. Keep safe and stay at home as much as you can. We have had new directive about masks and everything else. Inshallah, we all pray together that one day soon we will see the back of this crisis. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.